Hey there, welcome to College Algebra, section 2.2. My name is Gregory Carlson, and this section is looking at the equations of circles. So we're going to be looking at circle graphs on our little XY graph. And when we do this, it's important to remember that you should have learned in your previous math classes that what a graph is a solution set. A graph represents all of the XY pairs that make an equation be true. So for example, back in our previous section, we had this line right here. This line represents all of the points that there was some equation, and this line satisfies that equation. It would be a y on one side and x on the other side, and all of the xy pairs would be solutions to that equation, would all fall on this line. So that's what we're going to look at, and first you need to know what the circle equation is. And so the circle equation, I'm just going to write it down, and this is something you should memorize. So I'm going to put a star by it, and it should be x minus h squared plus y minus k squared is equal to r squared. That's the equation for a circle, and so the center of the circle is the point hk, and the radius of the circle is just r. So before we get too far into this, let's go ahead and graph an example. Let's graph an example. We're going to graph x minus 3 squared plus y plus 2 squared equals 9. So you should recognize that this is the equation of a circle because we have this part, x plus or minus something being squared, plus y plus or minus something being squared equaling a number. Any equation like that where x and y are being squared, there's no fractions, we equal a number kind of like this, you should recognize that that's the equation of a circle. So to find the center, we need to find hk. So basically all you have to do is just flip both of these signs, and that's the center of your circle. So the center of this circle is going to be the points 3, negative 2, which I just found by flipping that sign and flipping that sign. So let's graph that point. 3, negative 2 lives right there. That's the center of the circle. Next we know the radius. This is r squared. So if r squared is equal to 9, then that means our radius is equal to 3. Because we're talking about geometry, so we're only looking at the positive answer. R squared is 9, so that means the radius is 3. A lot of students make a mistake because they think the radius is 9. That's not true. You need to take the square root of it to find the radius. So from our center, we're going to go up 3, over 3. Let's see, 1, 2, over 3 in the other direction, and down 3. And so we get those 4 points right there, and if we connect them all, we get a circle. And it's literally that easy to graph a circle. If it's in this form right here, you just flip the sign, that's your center. And then that's your radius squared, so you just take the square root of that. And then it's up, down, left, and right, and then just connect all of the dots. So this circle right here represents all of the xy pairs, and there's an infinite number of them, all of the xy pairs that if you plug in a value for x and a value for y, do all of this math, you should get 9. So let's look at an example. This point right here is the point 0, negative 2. And so that should be on our graph, so that means that point should satisfy this equation. So let's see if it does that. We'll plug in a 0 for x and a negative 2 for y. So that would be 0 minus 3 quantity squared equals, plus negative 2 plus 2 quantity squared is maybe equal to 9. We hope it is because it's on our graph. So let's see if it is. 0 minus 3 is negative 3. And if you square that, it makes it a positive 9. Negative 2 plus 2 is 0. So that's just 0 squared is maybe equal to 9. And sure enough, 9 plus 0 squared is the same as 9 plus 0. So we get 9 equals 9. So that means this point, 0, -2, which is on our graph, satisfies this equation. And that's what we want. We want points that satisfy this equation. So this is all well and good when the equation is nice and written out for us. It takes only about 30 seconds to graph this if you know what you're doing, center, radius. But unfortunately, it's not always going to be in this form. And so the standard form equation for a circle is the following. This is the standard form. And you're going to notice that this is called center radius form. And the reason is because it's real easy to see the radius and the center. But this is what it's going to look like some of the time. So I'm going to teach you a way to convert this into this form up here. And I've actually made a slight mistake, so I apologize. This should be an A here. It's a circle graph if both this and this are both the same number. And we'll see that here in a second. By the way, I forgot to mention that if we end up having a radius of 0 right here instead of a number, that's basically, the graph of that is basically just a single point. So in a way, a point is kind of a circle with radius 0. So to convert from the general form, from the standard form to get to the general form, we're going to use a process called completing the square. And it's a little bit tricky the first few times. And so I'm going to show you how to do it in the next part. To go from this form to this form, to go from general form to standard form, just FOIL and simplify. So that's actually not too hard. To go from general form to standard form, you just FOIL. So in other words, if we did this and we foiled this, we moved the 9 over, you would get it in this form where you have x squared, y squared, xy, and a number all equaling 0. So that's pretty easy. Just FOIL and move everything to the left. It's a little more challenging to go from standard form to general form. You complete the square. And I'm going to show you that process in the next part. What I will tell you is that when we're completing the square, we're going to use a magic number. And it is magic. It's not really. It is magic. We're going to use a magic number that's going to help us complete the square. And that number is going to equal b divided by 2 quantity squared. And why do I use the letter b? I use the letter b because that relates to parabolas, which we'll look at later. But essentially, b is going to be this number or this number. So we're going to stop right here, and I'm going to show you how we're going to do this in the next part. But just know for now that there's a magic number, and we find it by taking some number divided by 2 and then squaring that number. I know you're excited to see what the magic number is, and so we will look at that in part 2. See you there.